For those who have attended these sessions before, welcome back. For those that this is their first time attending, welcome. I will be hosting this session solo. My name is Jenna, so if you have not seen my face or heard my name before, nice to meet you. I work on the TDS Health customer engagement team, and so if you have connected with me before, it's most likely been in the form of a training or an onboarding for a TDS Health partnered product. And so I predominantly work with clients to help them utilize the content that they purchase with us and use it to its max potential, finding different ways to make it work for your faculty, your students, and then even through the library, how to get out to your patrons and get it out there to where they know they have it available and how it can work within their curriculum. So today we're going to be focusing on one of our resources called Anatomy TV, powered by Primal Pictures. If you have heard Primal Pictures or Anatomy TV before, we're probably thinking about the same thing. A lot of times those are used interchangeably. And at the focal point, this is going to be a virtual anatomy tool, but there are a lot of different areas in here that can be used in other courses and other facets within your education as well. We're going to focus on a couple of different areas within the Anatomy TV product threshold and really follow a learner journey from a foundational introduction to anatomical concepts all the way up until how that can be applied from a clinical perspective. So depending on the type of programs that your institution offers, the type of anatomy that you teach, there's varying different areas within the Anatomy TV product that you can utilize and also carry with your students throughout different stages of their learning. So if you're focused heavily in that introductory anatomy 201, 202 era, and that's where your focus area is, or let's say maybe you are teaching a dissection lab or a pathophysiology course, there's stages throughout the different resources within Anatomy TV that can be used at those different stages of learning. Um, you should see that our chat and Q&A functions are available. So if you have any questions as we go through, please feel free to let me know. This is going to be a 30-minute session, so we're going to be going kind of quick and we'll be hopping through quite a bit of different types of material. But I do want to encourage interaction and questions in the chat if that's something you have. If you are a current subscriber of Anatomy TV, thank you. And also, if you would like a deeper dive into the content that you have, this is really meant to be as an introductory area to the different places, the different pieces. But if you're someone who currently has this content through us and you're watching this going, ooh, I'd really like to use this more in this way or learn more about this area, we're happy to set up more individualized trainings for you, your faculty, your students, however we can support your group. So I'll go ahead and get us going and get my screen shared and get us started. But thank you again for everyone for hopping in, and I'll give me one moment and I'll get us going. Alrighty, so you will see that we have my screen sharing right here. This is going to be my Anatomy TV dashboard, and we are logged into my account. So again, if you're a current subscriber, this might look a little bit different for you, depending on the modules that you have access to. I want to take a little bit of some time to talk about the background of Anatomy TV and Primal Pictures. I could talk about a lot of different areas where Anatomy TV is different and really is a step above other resources out in the field and how it can really be utilized in space. But what I like to lean into is something that I've worked with their product team on and something they really pride themselves on is that going to be the accuracy within the content. So the material that we're looking at today is built off of real scan data. So we're looking at content that is not artistically rendered. We're utilizing actual imagery and cadaver imagery to build up the models within here. So that really is designed to give confidence to the student, the educators, anyone who's accessing this material that what you're looking at is accurate and is going to be correct. So that way, when you have to further build upon the building blocks of anatomical learning, the confidence is there from the start. So while we're talking about the building blocks of anatomical learning, let's talk about where that usually starts, and that being anatomy and physiology. So What I said at the top of this webinar is that really I want to show you all how this resource can really live throughout the entire experience of a learner. Again, you may be serving one particular area, or you're a library and you serve maybe two or three stages of anatomical learning. But the uniformity of being able to use the same type of resource, just different types of material within there across that spectrum, can really give a sense of comfort for students and faculty when they're looking to integrate something into curriculum or use something for reference when they're learning something more. So the first stage of that I want to utilize is the anatomy and physiology resource that I have up here. If you teach an A&P course, a lot of these different topic areas are going to probably look very familiar to you. And today I want to live within the respiratory system. And so for those who have taken anatomy and physiology, or those who are teaching anatomy and physiology, a huge emphasis on that stage of that resource of taking that course is going to be introducing these concepts using the spatial awareness, understanding where structures are, what they do, and a little bit about that understanding of how those connect through each other. So if I open up the respiratory system, perfect. So I've opened up the anatomy and physiology respiratory system module. And so what you're going to see out the gate is that this is designed to look like an interactive textbook to some extent. Now, don't let that description take away from that there's a lot more in here than what you would think of when you see a textbook. When I say interactive textbook, I'm really leaning into the fact that throughout the different areas in the anatomy and physiology module, there are pieces that would be something similar to an anatomy and physiology textbook. So on the right-hand side here, you said that we have some learning objectives. You'll see that there is going to be interactive learning and self-guided quizzing throughout this resource. But we take that more stagnant material that you would see in a textbook and we marry that to interactive models that you have here in the center across the different stages that you see in the different areas. So first one being in the introductory, but I'll tell you that I do have a little bit of a goal to get us to a particular condition at the end of this. So if you see that I'm making some preferences in the areas I pop into, that's why. But let's look at the lower respiratory tract. So if I open up this section, you'll see that we have an interactive model here in the center. We can select structures. If there's layers to be added or taken away, we can utilize that to add and take away those on the model. But then on the right-hand side over here, we have that corresponding learning objectives here at the top. And then we have this text area, which takes us through the different areas and the different knowledge points that you would learn if you were learning the lower respiratory tract in an anatomy and physiology course. So you see that we have images broken out of the larynx, and we can move through those different areas as I click through them, presenting onto our center here in our viewing panel to show those different models. So again, we can interact with those, we can move things around, and then we have both that clinical text piece and the model here in the center to utilize as we move through. Now, in addition to that, something you're probably familiar with if you've looked at an anatomy and physiology textbook, it's not always just reading, there's also some activities. So you'll see this little beaker down here on the bottom right. This is an indicator that we have some interactive learning properties throughout here. So whether that's a point and click, a matching activity, a self-guided quiz, those are present throughout here for you to move through and see different areas to test your knowledge and understanding of the concept that you're looking at. So again, I'm in lower respiratory tract, but we could also look at that we've got respiratory membrane and gas exchange. The content in here that I've seen really shined for some anatomy and physiology clients is some of these more microanatomy unique views that are a little bit harder to conceptualize. So you'll see here that I've got the alveolar cells. We've got different images here to show how those cells actually present, something that can be a little bit hard to conceptualize when you're just looking at still images throughout. So again, we've got the variety of different cells that we can move through, highlight on here to tell us what these are, and we can move through those different stages. This design that we have here is going to be consistent throughout the anatomy and physiology module as a whole. So I'm in respiratory system, but you'll see that the same look and feel applies to the others. It'll just change based on the topic. Now, I'm moving through quite quickly. I do talk a lot. I do know that. A couple of other places I want to point out over on the left-hand side real quickly. That beaker that I mentioned before, this is a collection of those different interactive learning areas. So again, if I wanted to open up the lower respiratory tract and take the larynx, this is where that we have to go through and click through the different structures and identify them. You'll see if I move down one more, I've got a quizzes area. This is where we've got some self-guided quizzes where you can go through, answer the questions, do matching, all those kinds of things, and see and test your knowledge. And below that, we've got a section called clinical correlates. Now, we'll dive in a little bit more later on the pathophysiology sections within the Anatomy TV resource, but this is really designed to show you how the content that you just learned in this section can be applied in a clinical element. So you'll see there's a couple sections here. We've got clinical aging and case studies, and each of these are indicators of particular areas where that content will show in a clinical space. So the first one being here, asthma. This is going to pop up later. I've got a trend going, where you'll be given a breakdown as an overview, causes, symptoms, diagnosis, and treatment of that particular clinical presentation. So we have that in here for your review to connect the content you just saw to a clinical area. You'll also see that there is a section for aging. This is something I've seen really helpful within nursing programs to see how that age application is. And then lastly, we've got a section of case studies where you can actually go through a case study where you'll have a presentation, be asked a question, and then you reveal the answer as to how you were to respond to that particular case study. So really marrying all these things together. So as you move through that foundational topic, you get that introduction, and then by the end, you're already introducing some of the more clinical elements that you'll see later on in your career. I'm going to take a quick break to see if there's any questions. I'll pop through and take some water. We will talk about the sharing functions throughout Anatomy TV in a moment, but for the most part right now, I just want to focus a little bit on the content. Okay, I don't see any questions coming through, but again, feel free to utilize that if you would like. One question I do get frequently at this stage is, what if I just want to look for something in here? You do have a search bar up here on the top right. And then on our homepage, we do have a smart search, which will search across all the content that you have. So if you're looking for something particular within the respiratory system and anatomy and physiology, you can make searches in here, or you can search across everything to see what you have for a certain topic or structure across all the content that you have. Now I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to go back over to my homepage because we're going to pop into a different module. So we spent some time looking at the anatomy and physiology module, and now we want to take a little bit more time diving into how we might see that content from the respiratory system present further and further in our education. So we've moved through that 201, 202 course. Maybe now we're moving into more of an advanced clinical anatomy course, maybe a dissection lab. And so we can actually expand on that even further to the other modules that we have in here. And so if I click down here at the bottom, you'll see that we have a gross anatomy section here. This is broken up into two particular topic areas that are represented with different modules. So we've got the 3D real time, which is I have hovered over here. And then we also have the 3D atlas. Both of these are going to be more focused in that gross anatomy space, but they've got some differences between them. The 3D atlas is what I like to sometimes refer to as the one-stop shop. And you'll see why when we go in here and we spend some time, because you will have a variety of different types of content in the 3D atlas that you can utilize, whether that's MRI imagery, slides, some movies, different additional anatomical views that we can lean into, where the 3D real-time product is going to be really a sandbox tool where you can build your own custom views. And so we'll quickly take a look at both of those. You'll see that I have the 3D atlas. I have the thorax and abdomen open in front of me here. And it looks similar to the anatomy and physiology module, but you'll notice that there's some key differences. We no longer have that interactive textbook component. We're really more focused on the content and then the actual clinical text that relates to the material that we're looking at. So you'll see that I've got the thorax and abdomen here, this first section being 3D views, but I want to stick with what we've been talking about and look at some of the areas that relate to the respiratory tract. And so if I open up the thorax and go to the respiratory system, I can make selections of different models that I'd like to pull up. Again, having the ability to select structures. But here, what differentiates is instead of having that topic area on the right-hand side like a textbook, I'll get a deeper breakdown from a clinical text perspective of that particular structure I've clicked. So I clicked the tracheal cartilage, and you'll see over here on our clinical text panel, I have a breakdown as to what that content is, what is relevant about that structure, and you'll see that that applies as I move through and click through different areas in here. You'll also notice where you'll see this little orange, and that means that there's something else within here that relates to that, whether that's a slide, a movie, an MRI image. So that way you can bop around and move through different things, see it delivered in different media to familiarize yourself even more about the content. And I can add and take away layers of particular views, again, highlighting structures and getting those details over on the right-hand side from a clinical text perspective. So we've looked at the foundational topic. We've added on to really inspect that structure, understand it a little bit more, and really isolate particular areas. Well, now within the atlas, I can take that even further, and I can even apply imaging. So there's different imaging views in here. I've got an MRI axial, sagittal, and coronal views that if I wanted to pull up, I could move through this structure, highlighting different structures throughout that will highlight on my structure model on the left and then on my MRI imaging on the right. And you'll see up here on the top, we do also still have some clinical text. So you'll see that I've highlighted the right lung, I did the superior lobe, and I can click through those different structures, see them presented on both, and actually move through that imagery to see when I am able to view that, when I start to lose sight of that, and vice versa. So again, taking that foundational application and moving it through to what you would actually see more of in a clinical space as you start to prolong through your career of understanding anatomy more. Now, this is probably a good time to stop and talk about some sharing tools. So I'm showing you a lot of content, a lot of good things that can be utilized, whether you're a faculty member wanting to build out curriculum, a library wanting to build out LibGuides for particular courses, or if you're a student and you're here and you want to understand how can I self-study these things as I move through my anatomy courses. Well, there's a variety of different ways you can actually use the content in here, whether that's within the actual Anatomy TV platform or in other spaces that you might spend most of your time when you're teaching and learning. So down here on the bottom left, you'll notice there's a couple of icons here. The first one I want to point out is this three dots little section that's called the copy link tool. Now, this allows you to share the views that you are looking at with others through a standard URL link. So let's say, for example, that I want all my students, I want to spend some time looking at this MRI imaging that I've been moving around. I want to get it to a certain view, and I want all my students to start right here with this structure highlighted. This is where I want them to begin, whether that's for a lab practical or for their own self-study. I want them all to go right here, and I want them to navigate through the model starting at this point. I can use this copy link tool by generating a link. I can send that in an email. I can put it in a PowerPoint. I can put it on Canvas or Blackboard. And then when they click that link, it will take them directly into the resource at this particular view that I've highlighted. So that way I have that same starting point for all of them. So if I want them at a certain specific area, a certain angle, to really lean into that spatial awareness to make sure everyone's looking at it from the same perspective, I can use this copy link tool. Now, this copy link tool works both ways, and I've seen this utilized quite a bit where students actually use the copy link function to report information back to their faculty and to their educators. So if they're looking at this and they're spending some time looking at this MRI imagery and they're not understanding why when they get to a certain point, all of a sudden they've lost the visualization of the particular structure they were looking at, or they're not understanding why this is presenting this way on both, well, either the slide or on the model. So they can use this copy link tool and send a link to their faculty, to other classmates, to be able to communicate back and forth about what they're looking at. So really it allows for that kind of two-way type of communication for students and faculty, and then also for libraries building LibGuides, if they want to build out a couple of images that would be useful for a particular topic area, they can generate some of these links as well and have those to kind of quickly get people in here and get started. I don't see any questions, but I just wanted to take a quick second to check. Another sharing functionality that we have available is going to be the embeddable viewer function. So similarly to the copy link tool, this allows a user to get to a particular view or get to a particular area. But this would allow you to embed the content directly into your LMS system. So again, whether that's Canvas or Blackboard, whatever one that you're utilizing, a lot of the content within the Anatomy TV platform is actually able to be embedded directly in there. And what I mean when I say embedded, and I want to everyone put their imaginary cap on for a second, is we just talked about utilizing this view here of this MRI imagery and using a copy link to get students directly to this view. But let's say that I don't want students to go all the way into the Anatomy TV platform. Let's say that I know I'm going to be using this comparative MRI imagery for weeks. I'm going to want students in here a lot. I'm going to want them to be able to get to it quickly. We're going to be spending a lot of time in this particular area. Well, I can actually embed this viewing panel here in the center and the corresponding text directly into my LMS system. So instead of the copy link tool taking them into the resource and having the navigation panel on the left to go to other places, I can have them just have this viewing panel here. You still get all the interactive capabilities. We can still move through the model. We can still see all of those things, add, take away later layers, click on different elements to get that clinical text. But essentially, this viewing panel here that we have right here in the center, we will take that and that will go right into your LMS system. So whether that's on an assignments page or on a module page that you build out or a flipped classroom pre-lab assessment you want students to be doing, you can take this content and embed it directly into your LMS system for ease of use and access. And the last sharing function, probably the most obvious, is going to be the still image save functionality. So if you are more interested in taking, let's say, one of these images and taking that into Paint or printing that off, I'm still someone who's very much pen and paper that likes to label, you do have a save function down here at the bottom where you can actually save these still images that are in here, utilize them in your teaching and learning, whether that's a PowerPoint, again, labeling, if you want to do like a labeling lab practical, you can do all those things. You have copyright coverage within your subscription to take the information and save it, using it in your teaching and learning. And again, students have that same functionality. So the embeddable function probably won't be all that interesting to them. They're not really embedding content in the LMS system or building out curriculum within Canvas, but they can take material and save it. So if they are someone who wants to print off some of these views, if you've got 5 or 6 different views that you want to tell your students, hey, memorize these, you're going to be tested on them in a lab practical, they could actually save these images to mock them up, write them down, test themselves like flashcards. They have that available to them. Any questions or anything so far? I know I'm covering a lot of material and I'm bumping around, but I really want to show how you can utilize the different modules across those different stages, versus just staying within one module throughout one course particularly. Okay, I've got about 5 minutes left, so I'm notorious for going over time. So if you do have a hard stop right at the half hour, please feel free to hop off. We will have the recording generated and sent out. But I do want to be respectful of people's time. That way, if you have to hop out of here right when we get to the conclusion. So let's spend some time in some other places really quickly, while we're looking at here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hide this away really quick. And then I want to make sure I'm going to check my Q&A for a second, just because it's not viewable from when I have my screen sharing. Oh, I see a question in here specifically about changing color utilization. So yes, there are some customization options within each of the different modules, whether that's changing the colors that is highlighted on the particular structure or changing the background that the model is on. So you do have those abilities to change those coloring systems to be more compliant with what that student needs or what they're able to view. You also can zoom things in and zoom things out. And that way you are able to have that ability to kind of help with that if there's some different visualization impairments or needs that are there. So you do have those functionalities within the settings of different areas within each of the modules. Great question. So going back to sharing, we're back on my homepage, and I did not have time to go into the 3D real-time product today fully, but I do want to call out that we have been spending some time in gross anatomy. We looked at some of the material within the 3D atlas, and those are all preset layered views. So that MRI imagery we looked at, the 3D model that we looked at, those are preset layers. So there are varieties of different layers and views you can utilize. But if you are someone who's looking to generate your own more custom views, if you want to build out the respiratory system from the airways down to the different lobes of the lung, to show all of that and build that out in a customized way, that is where I would recommend the utilization of the 3D real-time product. And I'll quickly pop in here just to show you what I'm talking about, is that if I open up the thorax section of the 3D real-time product, you'll see that I've got a model here in the center. And then over on the right, I have all these different areas where I can add individualized structures. I can take them away. So I can build a model completely from scratch, or I can use pre-generated scenes that have been built in here for me. So if I'm looking at this view of the esophagus, I've got a couple different views in here that are pre-generated that I can use to start with, but I can also build them from scratch and then interact with them in an isolated way. So if I wanted to open up the different structures, I can inspect them in space. I can examine them like an X-ray, or I can use this ghost and hide button to look behind it or hide it completely and remove it. So fully customizing imagery in here the way I would like. We also have different views in here from a dissection perspective. Fair warning, I'm opening up dissection imagery. I know not everybody looks at this like I do all day. Um, but if I was to open up this diaphragm dissection, you'll see that on the left, we've got the actual dissection imagery, and I can actually click around and it will highlight on my model. So I can do a comparative of the cadaver dissection imagery to a model, and then I can interact with that further. And then one of the last layers of customization I want to point out today with the limited time we have is that you can also mock these things up. So we talked about creating lab practicals, lab assessments, or even for self-study. You have the ability to mock the material up in here. So sticking with our theme of the lungs, if I wanted to open up and create a particular view of the right lung that I want to utilize, I can use these little pencil icons over here to add labels. I can draw on here, I can add text boxes, arrows, and then I can take either a kind of screenshot and use that save functionality or the copy link tool to distribute this back and forth again from students to faculty, faculty to students. I have people use this for assignments where they actually submit the views they create for assignment purposes. But I will say that the 3D real-time product does not have that embeddable function right now. So what we're looking at right now, you would be limited to the copy link and saving, but you can make fully custom views in here if you would like. Now, the last section I want to pop into is going to be one called diseases and conditions. So we really spent a lot of time understanding the foundational concepts of the structures of the systems and really diving deep into different views, different mediums to be able to see that in space, whether that's through MRI imagery or virtual dissection views. But let's talk about it from a clinical perspective. Now, we saw those case studies, we saw that aging element, and we saw those clinical correlates within the anatomy and physiology section. We also have a section called the diseases and conditions under our clinical specialty section. Now, here is where we can jump into the actual disease presentation of these things. So let's actually stop sharing for a moment. I know I'm right up at time, but I really want to show you all this. This is where we actually have isolated diseases and conditions where we talk about what those actual pathophysiological implications are anatomically for those. So if I open up the diseases and conditions module real quick, you'll see we've got a variety of different specialties that you can look at. And again, I'm going to stay within the pulmonary and respiratory area. And you'll see that we've got a couple of different elements in here. So again, we've been sticking with asthma, so I'm going to stick with asthma a little bit more, where you'll see that you've got a corresponding movie that I'll play with the sound off to show that breaks down that actual condition and talks about the specifics of that, talks about the anatomical structures and how they relate to the pathophysiology you would see. You also have some clinical text here and some slides to show that actual imagery. So if we open that up, We can show the anatomical consequences of asthma, where you see that thickened and inflamed airway wall, how that differs from the normal anatomy. And if we scroll down even further, we've got causes, symptoms, and treatments to expand on what we already saw a little bit further within the anatomy and physiology. We're diving even deeper into the clinical element of these places and how they present. So um, that is the bulk of what I wanted to cover with everybody today. Again, I know we covered a lot of material, but again, wanting to show you that journey through the different modules and how that can be applied throughout the different stages of anatomical learning. We are about a minute over, so I want to see if there were any questions or anything that people needed before I let you all run away and hop off. Okay, I'm not seeing anything so far. Um, Primal Pictures, so the Anatomy TV platform does have mobile compatibility. This is some questions I usually get. So whether that's utilizing the mobile interface for some of the modules, there are also apps available for the 3D real-time tool. So if you are a tablet-heavy institution, it does have that compatibility to be utilized in that way. And you have the ability to also use that smart search feature. So if you are a current subscriber of this content and this is maybe your first introduction, I know I covered a lot of information today. I would recommend going into your subscription and on your main homepage. If you have a newer subscription model, you will see that you have this search bar here at the top. I recommend throwing in a structure or something that will relate to the teaching and learning you'll be doing, whether it's this upcoming fall semester or the semester that you're in, and search for different structures and see what comes up. This is a really great way to quickly see what you have available to you and how that can be utilized in your teaching and learning. Same thing goes for students and also maybe librarians on here who want to build out some LibGuides. My recommendation is to go poke around and see what you have. And then you can also set up some training sessions with myself through your contact, through your rep, and we'll able to take you in and do a little bit more learning there as well. Thank you again to everybody taking the time to listen to me talk at you for half an hour. We'll be doing a follow-up with the recording and then also some additional details. So if this is something new to you, you're not a current subscriber and you'd like to learn more, please feel free to respond and let us know. We'll get you in touch with someone. And I appreciate you all taking the time today. Thank you. Bye.